Not only has he been called the best sports interviewer of all time, but the best interviewer, period. This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my very special guest is none other than Roy Firestone. It all starts right here on Guys TV. You can also catch me on Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast, and on KCAA Radio right here in Southern California. Guys TV, Guys Radio, thanks for your support. Okay, Guys Radio, I've got a very, very special guest. You know, a couple of months ago, I interviewed who I consider and many consider the world's greatest written interviewer, a fellow by the name of Larry Grobel. It went so well, we did 2 interviews. He even interviewed me and he taught me a lot. I consider him a mentor just from reading his books and listening to him. And I found that subconsciously, I picked up a lot of information from him that's really helped me. Well, now I've got somebody even, in my opinion, the greatest sports broadcasting interview of all time. He's been called by Jim Murray of the LA Times, the late Jim Murray, as the greatest interviewer of all time. So maybe Larry and Roy can fight this out, but they're both icons. So let me tell you a little bit about Roy Firestone. He's a 7-time Emmy-winning and 7-time cable Ace Award-winning host, interviewer, narrator, writer, producer, groundbreaking original host of ESPN's legendary Up Close Classic and Up Close Primetime. Roy has interviewed more than 5,000 guests, and you know what? He's only made 25 of them cry. So musicians, right, actors, political figures, etc. He's just done so much. I'm not going to go through the entire profile because you all know him. You all love him. He's one of my all-time favorites. I can't tell you how many times I wait until 5:30 back on the East Coast to watch Roy Firestone's Up Close. So welcome to Guys Radio, Roy Firestone. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So let's start right at the beginning. The earliest information I could find out about you, Roy, is that you're tender as bat boy for the Baltimore Orioles during spring training in Miami. That's right. A really fun gig. How'd you get that?
Basically, we grew up in Miami. There were no sports teams, no professional sports team until 1966, which was the Miami Dolphins. Then there was no baseball, of course. There was no basketball, no Miami Heat. I was a kid who always couldn't wait for spring training to come to town before they moved out of Florida, mostly, a lot of them did, to Arizona. Of course, and there's still some teams upstate a little bit, but I couldn't wait. I mean, it was usually the second week of March, first week in March when spring training started, but balls and bats and catchers and pitchers were going as early as the second week in February. And we're on spring break, and I said, I want to find a way to get myself in there and get to know these players. I was probably 15 years old. So literally, I waited for the equipment truck to show up one day. I saw the notice in the paper that the equipment truck was arriving in Miami to unpack the Baltimore Orioles team to spring train in Miami. So I couldn't even drive then. My mother drove me, and I waited on the steps like a little kid, which I pretty much was. And I more or less talked my way into becoming the bat boy. And I did it for multiple springs and got to know some players. To this day, I still have very dear friends who played on those teams, Brooks Robinson being one, Jim Palmer being another. I knew all of them, and they all remember me as the kid. So that was really my first introduction, essentially, into becoming connected in any way to athletes. And by the way, my first interview probably ever was with a little, high school reel-to-reel tape machine with Brooks Robinson, and it didn't record. I had to come back the next day and ask him to do it again, and he did, and happily, by the way. So I had my experiences, but I think that is one of the great introductions to sports in getting to know players literally up close and getting to know their habits, their sandwiches, their cigarettes, their socks, whatever they need from me. That's part of what I did.
That must have been a lot of fun. You've always had a passion for singing and music, and I didn't get into that in the introduction, excuse me. But what inspired you to pursue a career in broadcasting? Because I've heard you say that holding the microphone and singing is your number one passion.
Well, that's a good point, and I appreciate that. Listen, I don't pretend that I'm the best singer in the world. I think I can hold my own. Anybody who wants to make that judgment can look at me on YouTube. There's tons of stuff of me singing. But I've been a performer really for 40 years. Played in Las Vegas, opened for everybody from Lou Rawls to Loretta Lynn. I actually did a show with Sinatra once. I always wanted to be a performer. What can I say? And I thought that sportscasting was an avenue for me to become a performer more than to be a sportscaster. So really it was people think, oh, sportscasting got me a chance to perform. The other way around, really. Microphone to me represented me getting on stage and more or less holding court. And I've been doing it for a long time. As I said, about 40 years. I do corporate shows all over the country. I played in Las Vegas a ton. I've had experiences like that you could only dream of. I played the Grand Ole Opry. I've played in Las Vegas at Bally's. I played with the Doobie Brothers. I mean, there's so many exciting things that happen in my life. And one thing I would like to say, Robert, is, music or no music or whatever, is people in their life, you should do what you want to do. Try it, at least try it. Don't be overwhelmed by, oh, I'll never make it. I might as well, become an insurance salesman. Nothing wrong with being an insurance salesman.
Right.
But if your passion is something like music, and in my case, I do impressions, musical impressions, I do storytelling. It's a whole variety show. And it's on YouTube. People can see it. I say do it. Life is short, man, and go for it. And for those people who have said, and there have been some, many of them even at ESPN, what is it that you want to do? You want to be a performer or you want to be a sports broadcaster? And my answer is always the same. I want to do good work, whatever that might be. I want to do good work in the performing realm or the interviewing realm or the journalism realm. As a writer, I've written 4 books. So I like to think there's room for everything. I really do believe that. I don't think people should be pigeonholed into doing one or another thing. Listen, I think that the world would be a happier place if people were happy. And happy is usually doing what they want to do. There's a lot of miserable people who don't do what they enjoy. Mm-hmm. And I'm very, very grateful that I've had the opportunity to do both. I mean, I've played on stages with everybody from Eddie Murphy to Jay Leno to Jerry Seinfeld to, in comedy and stand-up. Listen, I don't pretend that I'm in their galaxy even, but I had a chance to do it. And it was more than just a George Plimpton-esque, I'll give it a shot. I really was serious about it and did it for a long time and still am doing it. So I just enjoy it. I enjoy performing. I enjoy singing a lot. And I have a lot of of my favorite singers I've got a chance to meet over the years. Most recently, the late, great B.J. Thomas, who was one of my favorite singers.
Hooked on a Feeling, right?
Lovely guy. So I'm blessed. I mean, I know it's a cliche to say, but I really believe that.
Well, I love that you said that, particularly for my audience. This is Guys Radio. We're trying to do our very best to get information out there for guys to follow your dreams, no matter what age you are. I mean, here I am. My career was in advertising, and I remember sitting in front of the TV or going out for a run and coming back and saying, this was when I was between jobs in advertising, watching Up Close. I wanted to see who Roy had on, and then I'd watch a little bit of Sports Center, but it was really, I wanted to watch you. And now here I am, a few decades later, I'm sitting across the Zoom meeting with Roy, one of my heroes. And I know we're around the same age, but you know what? You do more than hold your own. You are the best at what you do. And I really am appreciative for you being here. But let's get into my pleasure. Let's get into the broadcasting. You have a storied career in sports broadcasting and journalism, starting with Sports Hotline, then Sports Look in 1980 on cable, leading to your game-changing reign, I'll call it, beginning in 1984, host of the iconic Up Close, where you basically reinvented and arguably perfected the art of the in-depth interview with the world's greatest athletes and leaders in entertainment and politics. I watched you religiously, as I mentioned, at 5:30 every afternoon between my advertising gigs. And did you see a new lane for this emergent area of sports journalism, Roy? Did you have to sell it? And who discovered you?
Whoa, there's a bunch of questions there. First of all, I don't know that anyone actually discovered me. I was given an opportunity because they needed, first on the USA Network, they had to fill between periods on the USA Network between hockey and in those days they had indoor soccer on USA. So they needed a show, and that's why they gave us what we call a show called Sports Look. And Sports Look, which is kind of a corny name, was basically a filler. I had an opportunity to do that show. Only 7 minutes, 8 minutes. And I don't know if it's, is it Malcolm Gladwell? Somebody has the theory that if you do 10,000 hours, you can excel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you can excel in almost anything. Well, I had more than 10,000 hours. I mean, I almost had 10,000 guests. And there were some early days when it wasn't so great. I wasn't so great. We couldn't even pull the kind of guests that most people would be even interested. I remember one time we interviewed Gunther Gable Williams, who was the lion tamer.
Right.
And he had a thick German accent. I could barely understand him. He's trying to talk about being a lion tamer, but that was one. And we had to do that interview in literally the parking lot at the Forum. Parking lot. And then I would beg people to come on the show. If I was at the US Open, we'd park our gear. We didn't have any makeup or any of that stuff. We just basically wing it, just go whoever walks by. And I'm at the US Open, and one time, sure enough, John McEnroe said, "Who are you?" And I said, I introduced myself. I was so-called nobody. I was probably 24 years old. I said, "I'd really love to have you sit down with us and do a good interview." And he said, "Okay." And he sits down. And this is when John McEnroe was the biggest thing in the world, probably, or one of the greatest tennis players in the world, certainly. And he gave me like an hour of really in-depth stuff. He was super open, as you know. I started realizing, we all know the stats. We all have the numbers. You all see the highlights, but we don't hear anything about who they are. And I like to think, of course, there's a lot of cliches associated with me that I make them cry and all that stuff. But I like to think that in the 5,000, really more than 5,000, closer to about 8,000 now, interviews that I did, I brought out something maybe if it succeeded, you didn't know before about that person. And that was always intriguing to me. For example, I'll give you an example. I don't have a show right now like that. Certainly trying to get it back on. We have some interested parties. And by the way, they are bringing it back up close on ESPN.
Awesome.
Sage Steele is going to do it next year, or maybe even late this year, and I wish her well. If I say this in a arrogant or egotistical, I hope it doesn't, but I don't really feel that anyone does it quite the way I do it. I'm just saying my honest opinion. I think people are very talented. I'm sure she's going to do a great job, but I think that I brought something different to the equation. Anyway, I just did a story about a guy, I'll hold the secret till the end, who ran away from home when he was 14 years old. He lived out of Chicago, and he ran into the reality that this was right in the middle of the Depression. He had no way to make a living. He became a beggar, and then he started going into garbage, and he started taking food out of the garbage. And he lived like that for 2.5 years until he finally got a job working at a radio station in Chicago. Well, the bottom line is this guy realized that his entire life was running away from poverty. So anything that he taught himself, whether it would be piano, whether it would be writing, he was self-taught in everything he did. He ended up becoming the greatest, in my opinion, greatest late night talk show host of all.
Can I guess?
And his name is,
Steve Allen.
You know who it is?
Yeah, Steve Allen.
It is Steve Allen.
And he was awesome.
And I never knew that about Steve Allen. And I interviewed Steve Allen 5 times, Robert. I never knew any of that stuff. If I had him on now, I'd talk about poverty, because I think that's what people are interested. I think people are interested in the backstories. I got so many I'm working on a new series called Unlikely Stories. And the fact that, for example, Tiger Woods' best round of 18 was a round of 9 in his career was 43 strokes. People say 43 strokes. That's like an 86 over 18 holes. That's not even good. Well, he was 3 years old at the time. Now, to me, backstory is fascinating. And I'd love to, if Tiger was healthy and wanting to do my interview show, which I had him on, but I'd like to talk about what he was like at 3 years old. I would like to go off the beaten path. I think Larry Grabell, who you mentioned, was my next door neighbor and one of my dearest friends, is another guy who loves to go in depth. And I believe that was the success of the show, and what I believe gained prominence, because I think deep down people don't care about the stats. They can get it anywhere. They don't care about highlights. They care about their stories. And if you're a good storyteller, I like to think I am, I think it kind of falls into place.
Okay, great. With that in mind, I went to a boxing match one time, and I had a pivotal moment for me. And I realized that some people some of these, maybe it's the alpha males or whatever, but you go to a professional boxing match, it was a Mike Tyson fight down in Atlantic City, and there was so much testosterone and so many of these alpha male athletes and incredible people. And I noticed they started introducing everybody, both on the screen, and then I saw them in person. And I watched and listened to and really felt when the energy really connected. And there was two people out of all these tremendous athletes and entertainers who stood out because I felt their vibration. It was huge. And one was Don Johnson. This was at the height of Miami Vice. And everybody, it was like the seas parted when he walked down the aisles. And I was amazed by that. And he just has that unbelievable charisma. And the other one, who was even bigger than that, was Magic Johnson. So I'm wondering, you've interviewed virtually every famous athlete from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, Roy. And out of those over 500 stars that you've interviewed, were there any whose energy transcended their notoriety in sports and entertainment that really wowed you? Like, wow, this is a really special individual.
Well, it's a cliche to say it now, sadly, but Kobe Bryant. I realized that this kid had something. I interviewed him at 18. I'll tell you a very quick story. The day remind me, Robert, to get you into a Mike Tyson story after I do this, okay? So it was the first interview in Los Angeles, certainly the first television interview. And we're at Loyola Marymount College to do the interview. And this was a rainy day. And we were all set up with our crew, and he sits down and boom, a lightning bolt hits the structure, the building, and knocks all the power out and blows all of our power out, all of our lights out, everything. And so my crew says, we're going to have to reset and we're going to have to re-scramble and get all new equipment. It's going to take at least 2 hours. Can you tell Kobe Bryant, who was 18 now, that, you know, he could come back in 2 hours and we'll do it again? So I walk up to this 18-year-old kid out of high school. And I said, Kobe, would it be okay if you come back? He says, no, I'm not coming back. I went, oh God, here we go. He says, I'm staying. I said, staying? He said, yeah, I want to learn. I want to learn about what you do. And he says, I want to learn about the cameras. I want to learn about the lighting. I want to learn about how it's edited. I want to learn what you use and what you don't use in this interview. I want to learn about interview. And I said, this is a rare young man. This is somebody who gets it. You know, I could talk about a lot of things about Kobe Bryant, but one of the things that really struck me about him was when he made up his mind, he wanted to be the best. Basically, he worked his ass off to become the best. So if he had idolized, and he did, Michael Jordan, and saw every piece of the video that Jordan ever had out, both from Space Jam to the 94 playoffs, he'd watch every frame, and I mean every frame. He would learn how to chew the gum the same way that Michael Jordan. His voice, if you listen carefully, he has the same speaking voice as Michael Jordan. It's almost eerie. But when answering a long-winded answer to your question, I realized that I was really onto somebody who was special. And he would probably say, special doesn't matter. Luck matters, but luck only matters if you work hard. And I think, you know, he was the greatest, he had the greatest work ethic of just about anybody I'd ever been around in my life. And I knew that it didn't matter if he was going to be a librarian or a mechanic or a lawyer. He would have been the best at what he did because he was dedicated.
My special guest on Guys Radio, Roy Firestone. Let me just, for our listeners and viewers, read a couple of the names here. There's 5,000. So Michael Jordan, Wilt Chamberlain, Cal Ripken, Mickey Mantle, Ray Lewis, Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, Barry Bonds, Kobe Bryant, Roger Clemens, George Steinbrenner, Hank Aaron, Sugar Ray Leonard, Oscar De La Hoya, Charles Barkley, Jim Brown, Wayne Gretzky, Magic Johnson. The list goes on and on and on. Wow. Let's get into you're dealing with Bobby Knight. This is a funny one, and it's for our friend Larry, who calls you the greatest sports broadcaster, interviewer of all time. So you should know that. And he was so kind to connect us. How did you get Bobby Knight to remain so calm and composed during your interview? Because I know our friend, the great interviewer, Larry Grobel, had a little tougher time with Knight. You listening, Larry? You even pranked Larry about this.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, Bob Knight was a lot of things. He could be the best friend you ever had and the biggest enemy ever. He could be miserably difficult, and he could be very easy. It was a strange thing. He could do both, and sometimes even in the same interview. He made things difficult for me at one point. He made things easy for me at one point. One of the regrets I have is in the middle of that choking incident. I didn't see the entire clip because I wanted to watch it on this show live when I interviewed him live nationally, live. And I did not know, but ESPN made a deal with him that he wouldn't show the video. And it made me look really bad. And it really set me back a great deal professionally, but such is life. But as far as Larry Grobel, my wonderful friend, my next door neighbor, he told me he's waiting on an interview with Bob Knight. So this is all I needed to hear. So I came up with a practical joke. So I called him one day and I started to speak like Coach Knight. I said, Larry, yes, who is this? Larry, this is Coach Bob Knight. Oh, hi, Coach Knight. How are you? Well, I'm fine, but I understand you want to do an interview with me. I don't really do a lot. I know, sir, I know you don't do a lot of interview, but I promise that I will do a good job. No, I don't have doubt that you'll do a good job. The problem is I'm in Spain. You're where? I'm in Spain. Oh, I'll tell you what I'll do. If you can get to Spain in the next 3 days, stay with me in my condo. I'll give you the best interview you ever had. Oh, my goodness. I just have to run it by Playboy, but I'm sure.
Okay, we froze up for a
Why
second.
do you? I like to sit in my underwear and watch television. If you'd like to wear your underwear too, I'd enjoy sitting there talking to you as we watch TV. Now Larry's going, okay. It's not a gay thing, Larry. It's just a comfort thing. And I want to make sure that you sit with me in my underwear when we're in our tidy whites and we're watching old movies, and I'll be open to you in an interview.
Wow.
Now Larry's buying all of this and finally goes, wait a minute. Who is this? And I said, it's me, you idiot. But he bought all of it. He got back at me, though. He tried many, many things to get back at me. But that's one of my favorite
Great
stories. I put one. I'm not normally a practical joker, but Larry's easy prey, if you know what I mean. But
well, he's been a mensch. I say it in the fondest terms, and he's been very helpful to me. I have taken a lot of what he taught me subconsciously, and it's really helped me a lot. So thank you, Larry. Let's talk about baseball for a minute, and then we'll get to Tyson Roy.
okay.
We're from the same generation. You were a bat boy from the Orioles. You became a lifelong fan. I grew up in New Jersey. My parents took my brother and I to Yankee Stadium for Old Timers Day 2 or 3 years in a row. Mantle and Pepitone even lived in our town. So it was hard not to be a Yankees fan. But for some, there's an unlikable corporate institutional aspect to the Yankees winning so much. They're supposedly buying pennants. And by the way, you interviewed George Steinbrenner. Can we talk about your hatred of the Yankees, Roy Firestone?
Well, first of all, let me give you a little bit of a caveat to this. I like the Yankee players, a lot of them personally. Tino Martinez was a great guy. David Cohn was a great guy. Mickey was wonderful. Whitey was wonderful. I mean, Steinbrenner gave me a terrific interview. So in a strange, weird way, they were more accessible, the Yankees were, than a lot of other players and a lot of other figures from other teams. But I had an advantage because even though I despised the Yankees because I was an Oriole fan and they always beat us every year, it wasn't a personal thing. It was just a winning thing. Steinbrenner was a friend of mine in the sense that he saw me perform my live show. And he asked me to perform for the United States Olympic Committee, the USOC. And he was, I think, chairman or one of the chairmen of the Olympic Committee in Tampa. So I get up there and I do a show. And I mentioned Tino Martinez. He was in the audience that night. And it went really, really well. George loved it. And he gets up on the stage after I'm done, and he has a Yankee jersey that he wants me to wear, and a Yankee hat. And I don't know why George did this, but he put my name on the back of a Yankee. Of course, the Yankees don't have names on the back of their jersey.
Exactly.
That's one of the things that I do admire about them. They're very strict about their traditions. So he wants me to wear this jersey. And I will not allow him to put the jersey on. I said, George, this is in front of, 2,000 people. Now, there's a little bit of nervous laughter at first because it's awkward. And I'm serious. I'm not wearing this jersey. He says, well, just put the hat on. I said, I'm not wearing the hat. He said, we know you're an Oriole fan. We're going to try to get you to convert. You're going to come back and now you're going to be a Yankee fan forever. I said, no, I'm not. This is on stage. So finally I just said, George, I'm not wearing the hat. I'm not wearing the jersey. I thank you for both. I'm going to give it away to a charity, but the Yankees suck. I said this right in front of George, and he started to crack up and the place went crazy. I don't know where I got the nerve to do that, but it's a true story. And I like George. I in a weird way, I know that he was narcissistic and mean and could do some horrible things and vindictive. But when he made up his mind to be a good guy, he did a lot of great things for people. That's why some narcissists, not all, but some of them can really do some good things, good deeds. I think there's Jerry Lewis is a narcissist. He raised $1 billion for muscular dystrophy. I think that there's a yin and yang to narcissism. But anyway, back to George. So I got to know him a little bit, and I'm doing an interview with him in Tampa. And as we're setting up, I see the secretary in the office. I said, what's your name? I'm Marilyn. Hi, Marilyn. Nice to meet you. I'm Roy. Yeah. Hi. I said, how long have you worked for George? She goes, let me think. 5 times, 8 times. I said, what do you mean times? What do you mean time? How many years did you work? She goes, oh no, he fired me 5 times. And I came back. So technically I've been back and forth 8 different times. I said, why do you come back? He says, because it doesn't mean anything for him to fire me one day. The next day I'm just there. I just never believed that I've been fired. And so I said, tell me something about George that no one would believe. I said, she goes, easy. George loves circuses and he loves fairs and he loves roller coasters. I said, whoa, that's interesting. I said, but that's not that interesting. He goes, she goes, well, wait till I tell you the next thing. He'll wear disguises, get on a plane and fly across country to go to a fair as somebody just to ride the roller coaster. And sometimes when he sees fairs are in quote disrepair or needy for finance, Hillsborough Fair was a big thing in Tampa, he'll bankroll it because he hates to see them go down, and he'll do it anonymously. So he said, he's a hero to a lot of these people who have made a living at fairs and the amusement people, but he loved roller coasters and he's an expert on roller coasters. So one of the first things I said to George, you've had a roller coaster career with the Yankees. I've tried to throw roller coaster in as much as I could. You've had a lot of ups and downs. I'm wondering if you have an attraction to roller coasters. It's amazing you say that, Roy. It's amazing you say that, because I absolutely do. And there we go. So sometimes you take a little tidbit and you could take it and run with it. And that's what I remember from George.
That's amazing. And one of the things you just mentioned there, Roy, for our audience who are not aware, you are an incredible impressionist. So let's get to some of those, but let's get back to Tyson, because you wanted me to ask you about him. And I think in the same vein as Steinbrenner, where there was kind of 2 sides of him, I remember reading your words about Tyson saying, he started out as kind of this innocent kid, and then he seemed to turn over time. What happened there, and what's your Tyson story?
Well, in one word, it's fame. Fame changes a lot of things. You can talk all you want about money, but fame is intoxicating and entitling and can make you a good deal nuts, But I had Tyson when I was 19 years old also, and then all the way up to when he was 20 or 21 when he fought for the title and became the youngest champion ever when he beat Trevor Berbick. But my story is the night he beat Michael Spinks. I think you might have been at that because you said Atlantic City.
Yeah, and it was over before it started almost.
I flew cross country to get that fight, did some interviews before the fight. And the fight lasted 91 seconds. Now, I could tell you that Mike Tyson was very confident, as he had a right to be.
Sure.
And Michael Spinks was not
petrified,
which, by the way, he had a right to be. I could tell you because Michael Spinks came on the show about 2 weeks before the fight. I said, Michael Spinks, regarding the Tyson fight, are you concerned about the weigh-in? And he said, no, man, I'm concerned about the way out. So I love that, right? Then the night of the fight, they're giving. I'm in third or fifth row or something like that. I remember Richard Pryor was right in front of us, He came in to watch the fight, and there were a lot of celebrities there. And I could hear, it was so close to the ring, I could hear before the opening bell, the instructions being given out to the two fighters, Mike Tyson, Michael Spinks. And then as I'm watching them getting instructions, Mike Tyson goes to Spinks, "Tonight, I'm going to beat the crap out of you." And Michael Spinks goes, "I know." And he did. He really did. 91 seconds. The fight's over. Now, this is the incredible story. Fight is over. I'm running to get to the press room. Anybody who's ever been in covering an event knows the best thing to do is race to that press room so you can get a seat really close to the podium so you get your question. So I'm running. As I'm running, I hear a commotion behind me, and I turn around. It's Mike Tyson. He didn't even wait for the verdict of the fight. He just stormed out of the ring with his 6 members of his entourage, and he's going to the press room. And it's just me and a group with Mike Tyson behind me going to the press room. And I turn around and I see Mike Tyson, and he sees me. He goes, "Hey, Roy, come over here for a second. Come over here." Right? I'm going, "Oh my God, Mike, congratulations. You just knocked that." "No, don't worry about that. I want to talk to you for a second. How you doing?" Like I was at a freaking mall, like this had nothing to do with reality. He goes, "I want you to know something. I was watching up close last week." He just decimated some guy 45 seconds before. "And I'm watching your show, and you had your father on talking boxing. I was very impressed. He knew a lot about the sport. He knew about Benny Leonard and the early Jack Johnson and a lot of the great fighters that I admired. Do me a favor, tell him how much I enjoyed the appearance on your show and how much I would like to meet him someday and give him my very best." Right? Now, these are the days there's no cell phone. So I go to a payphone and I call my father. It's 11:30 at night. I wake him up. I said, "Dad, you're not going to believe this. I'm at the Mike Tyson fight." My father goes, "Wait a minute. Mike Tyson is a criminal, a bum, and one of the worst people who's ever been in sports. You shouldn't even be bothering with this. He should be in jail, that idiot." Right? I said, "Wait, Dad, just wait. He just said he saw the show you were on with me 2 weeks ago, loved the show. He just literally knocked out Spinks. He pulls me aside in the hallway to tell me how much he enjoyed you and how you were a great guest, and he wants you to have his very best wishes." Long pause. My father goes, "Well, Mike Tyson is one of the great champions we've ever had. There's no question about it." So he learned, my father, if you gave him a compliment, that's all that mattered. Didn't matter if you could Charles Manson give him a compliment, he would have been happy.
Well, you had the same experience, Roy, right, with Nixon, right?
Very similar. Nixon, I interviewed him in I think 94 or 3, and he, for some reason, took a liking to me. And we're doing this, and it's only about baseball. That was the only rules we had. We couldn't talk Watergate, although I slipped a couple in at the end. And we're changing tapes, and he goes, "I enjoy your show, but the show I enjoy most of all in your show is when you have your dad on." And I'm blown away by this, that he actually watches the show with my father. I call my father, same thing. I said, "Dad, I'm with Nixon." "Oh, that bum. He's a criminal. He should have been indicted. That guy should be in jail." I said, "Yeah, but he said he enjoyed your show that you were on." He goes, "But he did a lot of good things too. He was a great president in some respects." It's only about the compliment, Robert.
Of course. All right. You were the best thing on ESPN. And as I mentioned, you had an amazing presence. And I look forward to watching you, Roy, up close every day at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. And then one day I was looking and I couldn't find you. And the question that entered my mind then, and now I have the opportunity to ask it now, and it's on behalf of all the listeners who love you out there. What happened?
Well, for whatever reasons, most of them economic, ESPN didn't want to renew, which I respect. I'm a big boy. We all go through this. I thought there were other opportunities coming to me with Fox at the time. It didn't happen. And so more or less, I was free to do other things. And I did another show for Mark Cuban's network. I did a show for PBS. I did a bunch of different things. I've interviewed people outside of sports. I did interview with everybody from Burt Bacharach to, David Foster and some other people. I've been doing a lot of shows, but they haven't been seen nationally. Would I love to do it again? Of course I would. In fact, we're pitching a series called Up Closer,
I like it.
for next year. Whether it goes or not, we don't know. But again, I tell you this, I have no regrets. I mean, I don't sit around wistfully and longingly about what I should or shouldn't be getting. I had an unbelievable run. No one bothered me. I did thousands of shows. I'm the luckiest guy who's ever done it. Really, truly. Plus, I mean, how many people can say one night they're interviewing a Bob Knight and the next night they're opening for Lou Rawls in Las Vegas, which I did. I mean, I've had a diverse career, and I've written 4 books. I sing. I have a CD out. I just have had a ball, and so I don't have any regret. Do I miss people seeing my show? Sure, and I miss doing the show, but it's not a tragedy. It's just the nature of the business. They're going to get a new host now. That this is, I think, their 4th now host of Up Close. When I left, there was Chris Myers, there was Gary Miller, and there was another gentleman too, Chris Connolly, who did it, frankly. And I say this not to put anyone down, but the show never had the same ratings that we had. And again, it's economic mostly. ESPN's been great to me. I don't hold any grudges. But the truth is, it's the nature of the business. Would I have liked to have hooked on somewhere else again? Of course I would have. But it didn't happen. It's not a tragedy. It's just a disappointment. And disappointments more or less rule this industry. And you have to roll with the punches. And I've had a great life. That's my answer.
Thank you. It's beautiful. And thank you. With respect, I ask that.
Yeah,
Today,
of course.
today we live in a world as Twitter and Instagram stories, athletes and entertainers only allow, for the press now, limited access. They interact directly with their fans and they skip through the media, but they use social media one-on-one. Yet it feels like there's a need for more mindful and circumspect journalism and interviews as crafted and refined by no other than Roy Firestone. So hopefully, and I think it's going to happen, that the people are going to realize that there is a real need for the work you do.
Well, thank you. I want to mention something. Something happened last week that we all know about. Naomi Osaka pulled out of the French Open,
Right,
because she had a lot of anxiety and maybe some depression. And there were a lot of people who felt that she was disrespectful to her sport or the rules or the contract that she had, which said that she had to do these interviews. She is a prime example of somebody I would have loved to have had. And I would talk about the anxiety and talk about the depression and talk about being booed after she beat her idol, Serena Williams, at the Australian Open, and talk about where it comes from and talk about being from a mixed race. Father was Haitian, the mother was Japanese, talking about things that I love to talk about, life, not just did you beat so-and-so in straight sets, who cares? And at least I don't care. So that's a perfect example of somebody I would have loved to have had. And I think perhaps I could have opened the door for her to talk openly about her anxiety and her fear of being interviewed or being asked questions. I've had people on my show who didn't want to be interviewed. I had one guy who Lester Hayes, who was a cornerback for the Raiders, you might remember.
oh yeah,
And he had a very bad stuttering problem. And he says, I only seem to stutter when the microphone is on. I said, well, we'll turn it off then. So he starts doing this thing, and we're recording this after we said we were turning it off. No stutter. Talked about what stuttering did to him and how he was afraid to talk to people, and it cost him his confidence, and he had to overcome it. All of this without a stutter. And I said, okay, you ready to roll? He goes, yeah, but I think I may stutter. I said, it's okay. We got it already. We just recorded that. It was really revealing. And I think that's the word. I think revealing for me, my show was that. If it wasn't, I'm not an expert, never claimed to be an expert. I couldn't tell you about strategies. I couldn't tell you about strong side linebackers versus weak side corners. I can't do that. But what I do like to think is I like to think that I can talk to people about their life and times. And that, if for whatever success I've had, that would probably be the calling card I had. And I believe no matter what people tell you, oh, it's a soundbite profession now, I don't buy it. I actually think my type of interviews is more viral than just about anyone's or anything out there right now. And I'd love to do it again. But again, if it doesn't happen, I've had a great life, great career.
Great answer. Real quick, I mean, all of our lives have pivotal moments, and you have a wonderful voice and an incredible range. When did you know you had this gift for singing and entertaining? I mean, everybody's seen Roy in Jerry Maguire, but I don't know if everybody knows that Roy is an accomplished singer, impressionist. He does monologues, he does corporate events. He's just really multi-talented. When did you realize you had this passion and this gift for singing?
Well, I here's the thing, Robert. I was first a vocal impressionist of singing impressionists. So I would do impression of Sinatra or Smokey Robinson or Tony Bennett or
Bring it, Roy. Bring it.
Well, it's kind of hard without music.
Right.
But, I want to be around, let people love. You know, Tony Bennett, that kind of
okay.
Something like that, or I'll do something like, look at me, I'm as helpless as a kitten up a tree. One time, Johnny Mathis came on our show, and he had heard that I did impression. I was worried that he would be offended, so we played a clip of me playing on audio only, cassette in Las Vegas, him doing the national anthem, as if Johnny Mathis would do them. Oh, say, can you? Right? We cut back. Mathis thinks it's really him. He goes, where did you get that? That's what he mean. He goes, I don't remember doing the national anthem anytime recently. I said, that's me. He goes, no. I said, yeah. He goes, that's unbelievable. I thought that was me. What a great compliment that was. But in answer to your question, I always wanted to be a performer. So I hid behind the vocal impressionist bits from my real voice. And only until about 1995, say, of all the years I've been doing this, that I decided to sing in my own voice. And I recorded a jazz album with a Grammy-nominated band called Hiroshima. It's also out, called Another Voice. It's also on YouTube if people want to listen to it. And if they want to buy it, they can go to royfirestone.com. But I hid behind the impressions. And then finally I decided I don't want to hide anymore. I'm going to sing in my own voice. And I've been doing that for a year. In fact, I even have a bit now. Some of my favorite singers included Glenn Campbell. I do a bit about Glenn Campbell. I don't do an impression of Glenn Campbell, but I sing Wichita Lineman in my show. It's a really cool moment in the show. I also sing like the Beatles. I was able to create with green screen effects, me performing with the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. It's in my act. So these are all dream come true stuff. And but I always wanted to be a singer. I think singing is the most authentic thing that I do, strangely enough. And I want to follow my authenticity to every last breath I have, because if you live an authentic life, you're a happy person.
I know you got to jump, so just a couple of quick questions.
Sure,
impressions. Who was your first? Who was your favorite? And how do you select your subjects?
My first ever interview, or interview on the TV show?
Impressions.
Oh, first impression. Okay. God, it's a long story. I did a John F. Kennedy impression when I was a kid, little kid, at a pageant in Florida where I grew up. And it was 1962. So I was 7 years old, 6 years old. And I was kind of a cute kid. And let me say this, I did all that stuff, right? And I got my mom gave me the clip-on tie and the whole thing. And it's my first taste of some kind of celebrity, even in elementary school. Girls would come up to me, that was so cute, right? I'm going, well, I kind of like this. Then unfortunately, President Kennedy gets killed. Right. And now these very same people who were all wanting to hang around with me, now I'm like a leper. They don't want to talk to me. They don't want to. I'm a sad person. It's a sad thing. So I had to go through that. It was actually a little trauma for me as a little kid. So I started with the Bobby Kennedy. Same thing. Right. So I stopped doing Kennedy impressions.
Oh my gosh.
But that was my first impression, was John F. Kennedy.
Okay.
My favorite impression? Well, it's hard to say, but I really enjoyed doing my Keith Jackson impression, because Keith Jackson was a hero of mine, and David Letterman heard me on the Larry King Show doing Keith Jackson. I'll do it for you in a second. And he booked me on the show because of the Keith Jackson. That's the only reason. He wanted me to do the impression. And I came on, and I was on 4 different times with Letterman, and I had a ball. But my favorite thing about Keith was, and I'll pay off this whole segment with my impression before we go, was Keith got wind of the impression and he wasn't pleased. He thought I was mocking him and he was not happy. And then finally, people over a period of time said, Keith, don't you see he admires you? And I did. I really did admire Keith. And I thought he was the greatest. I thought he was one of the greatest announcers of all time. And he went from not wanting to have anything to do with me to coming on the show, getting a kick out of me doing an impression. And when he passed away, his wife, Turianne, who's still alive, and they were married almost 60 years. She said, would you do me a favor, Roy? Keith would have loved it if you did an impression at the memorial service. So I did my Keith Jackson impression at his memorial service, which was a great compliment. So I'm going to close off with this impression of Keith Jackson before we say goodbye. I really enjoyed joining you, Robert, and I thank you,
Roy. Thank you.
But it goes like this. Well, hello, get about this Keith Jackson College Football 2022. And I tell you, we've got a real burn booty for the College Football CFA. It'll be the proctologists from Johns Hopkins University taking on the Big Red Suicide Machine from Jack Kevorkian Junior College. And Rodney Anderson Rose on the right side. He's got some run with the 3, the 20, the 15, the 10. He's hit and cracked and fumble. Oh, Nelly. By the way, Keith never said whoa nilly. And he made sure he told me that on the show. He goes, Roy, I've never said whoa nilly. I said, I know you didn't, Keith. That's just an added attraction.
Thank you so much, Roy. I had so many more questions, but we'll get to them hopefully another time.
We'll do it another time.
I want to mention that you have a book out. Roy's got a book, Kobe and a Boy Named Roy. I'm getting it from my son. He's 8 years old. He's going to love it. And Beautiful. I thank you. You are a hero. I know we're the same age. I don't care. I love your work. Keep going.
Thank you. I appreciate it. By the way, if people want me to sign that book personally, they can go to royfirestone.com, order it there. There's also 3 other books and my CD, so I can plug a little of everything.
Sure.
And thank you for having me, Robert. It was a pleasure to be on Guys Radio.
Please come back. Thank you so much, Roy Firestone. Ciao.
Take care.
If you enjoyed the interview and you want to support our efforts to bring you the very best content to help you live your very best life, please subscribe to Guys TV here or subscribe to my podcast, Guys Radio.